Hi, it's Wednesday, September 17th, and we have several systems to talk about in the tropics today. Starting off in the Western Pacific, we have three systems to discuss here. The first one is Tropical Storm 23, now in the South China Sea, which is likely to intensify a little bit as it tracks northwest and makes landfall in southern China later this week. Behind that, we've got Invest 90W, a disturbance which is likely to form in the next few days and is likely to intensify thereafter, potentially significantly as it tracks west towards Taiwan, the Philippines, and southern China, and we'll go into detail on that in just a moment. We've also got Invest 91W here in the open Pacific. This is forecast to gradually track west over the next few days. It's no imminent threat to land, but we'll talk about potential land threats that this could have in long range in that segment of the video. We're also going to be talking about Tropical Storm Gabrielle, newly named here in the tropical Atlantic, but this will be towards the end of the video. I'll leave a timestamp to this if you want to skip ahead to that part of the video. But like I said, we're going to start off in the Western Pacific, and we're going to go left to right here with all our three systems. Starting off with Tropical Storm 23, this system is now moving north of the Philippines. The system looked pretty good this time yesterday when it was east of the coast. It had seemingly on radar tried to form an intercore structure, but luckily the system was disrupted completely after moving across Luzon, which has pretty heavy terrain. And so that has now really put the system down to square one. And now the system needs a bit of time to recuperate itself as it moves back over the warm water. And so what this process typically is composed of is a system moves over water. It needs to pick up moisture, new moisture off of the ocean surface, loft that into the air, and get more organized convection going over the center. And this process typically takes about a day, and that's generally the expectation is that over the next day the system is recuperating itself, getting it ready to intensify. Now beyond that point, the system will probably have a good day window where it has time to intensify before landfall in China. Now, if we look at the water vapor imagery over the system, we can see that there might be a little bit of westerly shear being imparted upon the system right now. There is a little bit of an upper trough or upper low sitting now just west of Taiwan, and you can see some of these convective bursts, their tops are getting sheared off slightly to the east, so maybe a little bit of persisting westerly shear from this upper trough. But what we can also see east of this is upper level cirrus clouds curving clockwise or anticyclonically over Taiwan. And what this is indicating to us is that an area of high pressure is now forming on this side of 23. And so if we look at the GFS depiction of this as we go towards our Thursday, here's the storm by this point, and by this point the system has now recuperated itself. It's gotten more convection going after spending about a day over water. Here's that upper low, and note the position of the storm relative to this. It's now on the eastern side, so the upper level flow around this low and the ridge that's forming is towards the northwest, and that's exactly where the storm is going. And the net effect of this is lower vertical shear, and with this upper high here, we have good divergent flow aloft, which is helping the system to breathe, if you will, as it tracks further northwest. And so this environment will generally favor intensification going forward. And so the GFS shows this. You can see the red number there indicating the pressure lowers, which shows strengthening all the way up to landfall. Now, the good news is here for China is that a day is not all too much time for the system to intensify. So we're not likely going to see the system intensify drastically. And the other good news is here is that the system has been trending further north with time on model guidance over the past day. You can see on the GFS, for example, we now move ashore and we don't really ever move back offshore. So the system just moves ashore and weakens, and that's the end of the story of this system. Whereas yesterday, the GFS had the system staying just offshore enough to where it was able to slightly intensify as it just paralleled the coast. And that's the general expectation now for models today. We've seen a significant trend to have this system more over land. Now, there is still some room for that to change. This is still, about a 3-day forecast, but I'd say by now, confidence is getting pretty high that the system will be making landfall, and it's unlikely that we see a very strong storm come out of this, when it's all said and done. Now you can see those changes reflected in the forecast from Pagasa. You can see it coming northwest and now moving ashore and weakening after that point. And by that point, the main risk would be rainfall from the system pulling in moisture from the South China Sea. And you can see as well, there is still that potential with this forecast because the system does deviate a little bit south, but that's not the most likely scenario by this point. The most likely scenario, excuse me, is that the system will be coming ashore into southern China. And in terms of the intensification we see, in all likelihood, it probably won't be a typhoon when it comes ashore. I'd say that would maybe be the worst case scenario of the system. I think the most general solution that we can see out of the system is a tropical storm or maybe a severe tropical storm coming in, especially if it plays its cards right today. If we see better development today, that would increase the intensity that we could see at landfall. But again, not looking at something very strong coming in here to southern China. Now, like I said yesterday, the 23 is not the only system we have to worry about over the next week across not only southern China, Taiwan, but in the northern Philippines, as we have another system that's likely to form behind it. It's this area of low pressure between the Philippines and Guam. And it's this area of low pressure in the tropical Pacific. Here's the closer view of it. And we can see in this map, it's a little bit hard to see, but there is some spin evident here at the surface. And we have a lot of organized convection going up around this. But the system is gradually developing with time, and models are in unanimous agreement by this point that this system will be forming in the next few days. Confidence is very high on that solution. And once it forms, there is maybe something that could cause a little bit of shear for a time, and it's an upper low that's currently sitting, if I go back to the initialization on this, it's an upper low that's currently sitting to the northeast of Taiwan over southern Japan. This upper low is forecast to dive towards the south, and initially this may cause a little bit of shear over the system as it dives south, because this will be imparting a southerly flow on a system that is tracking more towards the northwest by this point. But the unfortunate thing of this is that this upper low is weakening quite quickly, and the convection that the system is blowing up is releasing a lot of heat into the atmosphere, and heat tends to weaken these upper lows very quickly because these upper lows are cold cored in nature. So when you warm up the environment, these upper lows weaken. And once this upper low is fully decayed, 90W is really left in an ideal environment for intensification to occur. You can see by this point, which is this weekend, the upper low is practically gone by this point. And what we see now is the upper low wind environment surrounding 90W is now all light winds. And alongside that, winds going in a clockwise manner, rotating in a clockwise fashion, which shows you an area of high pressure developing directly on top of the system. And by this point, it's all up to the system's structure for if it's going to intensify or not. If it's in a state where the convective organization is enough, it will be able to intensify at this point. And we see it on the GFS. You can see the red number here starts to drop rapidly and indicating rapid intensification that occurs on the model by this point. And this is not only the GFS, we have the European and various other global models showing that this is likely to occur as we head into this weekend and into early next week. So the key message today is similar to yesterday for Taiwan, the Philippines, and southern China, in that a typhoon is likely to develop out of 90W, and this could potentially be of significant strength when it comes through early next week. Now, exactly who's going to get hit by the system directly, that's still a bit uncertain. We're about 5 days out from when the system would be impacting the Philippines and Taiwan, and further out from there for the impacts to China. And if we look at the steering pattern for the system, we generally have an area of high pressure sitting over eastern China, South Korea, and southwestern Japan. This will be directing the storm towards the west, but we don't know exactly how far north or how far south the system will be in this track. If it's further north, then Taiwan gets the brunt of the typhoon, whereas if it's further south, the Philippines may get the brunt of it. Where if it's in the middle, the system or the islands in between, the Luzon Straits get the direct impacts, and that could be worse for southern China, because now you're not dealing with much land interaction, and so the system is virtually unimpeded as it tracks through this area of water, barring any structural changes that could cause some intensity change. So the key message remains here for Taiwan, the Philippines, and southern China is that, again, a typhoon is likely to form out of 90W in the next several days, and it's likely now that the system will be of significant strength. The waters here have been virtually untapped this entire typhoon season, and really, apart from structural changes right now, at least from the current model guidance that we see here, there's not much that seems to be stopping the system from intensifying. So now is the time really to be reviewing your typhoon preparedness plan. Make sure you're watching the system very closely and staying tuned to local weather offices so you can have the best information on the system as it does progress over the next few days. And I will have more videos absolutely on the system as it goes throughout the next several days in this forecast. Now, beyond this, the environment generally still looks favorable. There may be some more uncertainty by this point because we are getting towards day 6 and 7. There may be some increasing shear because you can see we have this upper ridge here and then a little bit of a trough digging in to central China. It's possible that that may impart a little bit of shear upon the system, but this can easily change in the next 6 to 7 days, and we also have to contend with the potential interaction that the system has with Taiwan or the Philippines. So we'll see what happens, but again, looking like a system is going to form here and could be of significant strength as it comes through. Okay, finally in the Western Pacific, we have Invest 91W here sitting in the subtropical Pacific. This system is really going under the radar of some model guidance. For example, the GFS model has been doing very poorly with this system. If we go to the GFS model again here, I can show you this just now. If we take a closer look at 91W, you can see that the system is likely very close to being a tropical cyclone already. We can see a area of low pressure evident beneath of some pretty organized and persistent convection, which is a classic telltale sign that the system is near tropical cyclone status. But if we look at the GFS's initialization of this, it's showing it that it's a very weak trough right now. And so the GFS really does not do too much with this system. Now, the European has been doing much better with the system. It's actually grabbed on to the system development today, and this is a model that we're primarily going to be looking at for the system going forward, at least for now, until the GFS gets its act together. Now, for the next several days, you can see the system is really in the middle of nowhere. So for that reason, the system is not an imminent threat to land, and we're going to be watching the system for the next several days, likely tracking west, and it may be a nice picturesque typhoon to look at, as the Europeans suggest that the system could get rather strong in this part of the Pacific, as we have very warm water relative to normal, and the environment in general does look pretty favorable. But long term, could there be any threat from the system to any land areas? It's very far out, but it is possible. If we look at the 500 millibar pattern out to day 5, so this is out to next Monday, by this point, the system is now here. This is Invest 91W, still well southeast of Japan. And so what we've got is we've got a strong area of high pressure just south of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. We've got a trough here that's just pushing north of Japan. And we've got another ridge here sitting just west of 91W over southern Japan. This is what's directing 90W into the South China Sea. And so 91W is sort of wedged in between these two areas of high pressure. And so it's going to try to come north into the flow of this trough. But this trough is changing in evolution between model runs. It's also moving fairly fast. It's a fairly progressive trough overall. As you can see here, it quickly pushes northeast into Alaska. And so what we've seen on some runs of the European is that there's potential that as the system comes west, it's a little too slow and this trough moves out a little too fast. And that may be a scenario where the system just stalls out here. And then behind this trough, as ridging builds back in over northern Japan, that ridge now catches it and dives it back towards the southwest and pushes it back towards the west, where it could potentially be a land threat at some point to land areas further towards the west. Now, it's important to remember, this is at least 5 days out, and by that point, if when that may happen, it's well past 7 days when it would even potentially be starting to go west. So we have a lot of time to watch the system, and there's a lot of ways that this pattern can evolve. That can be good, that can be bad. So we'll have to watch this over the next few days. Like I said, no imminent threat to land from 91W, but it's just another system that we will be watching in the Western Pacific. It's likely going to be a very busy next couple of weeks in the Western Pacific with all three of these systems active here. Okay, finally, we're going to move back to the Atlantic with newly named Tropical Storm Gabrielle. The system was named earlier this morning, and arguably the system is not a tropical cyclone right now. The system has likely not met that criteria today, or is not currently meeting that criteria. And that definition is that you need a well-defined circulation with organized and persistent convection over that center. And arguably, the convection is marginally reaching that criteria, but the circulation is likely not, because we see the system's center is still more elongated today. You can see these northerly winds on the west side take a while before fully turning back towards the east. And so we get kind of this elliptically shaped structure like this with the low level center. Now, something we are seeing happen right now is an area of low pressure, a tighter one, and perhaps more circular, is trying to form onto the northern side of this elliptically shaped low. And this will make a huge difference going forward for Gabrielle if this area of low pressure can sustain itself going forward. As right now, the system is dealing with the unfavorable conditions that we talked about it would over the past couple of days. You can see immediately that all the convection blowing up over this low is being pushed off towards the northeast, because it's now onto the western side of an area of high pressure aloft. And so that's causing southwesterly vertical shear aloft with the system. But also that dry air that we talked about that was now encroaching on the system yesterday, it's now directly impacting the system. You can see these darker tones of gray here denoting the drier air now punching into the southern side of the circulation. And so we see this also periodically getting mixed in to the center of circulation that's trying to form here, this little bit of a tighter low. And so this is going to be a struggle for the next several days. This is probably going to be a very ugly tropical system for the next several days as it works through the shear and this dry air environment. And we have seen some changes in model guidance tone over the past day, mainly with the GFS. The GFS yesterday and over the past few days has consistently shown this system becoming a strong hurricane further towards the northwest. But now the system on the GFS is staying rather weak throughout much of the model run. I'll run it through here over the next 7 days, and you'll see that the system really struggles to reform, and it really just does not do much in this forecast. Now, I do partly feel like the GFS is being a little bit too conservative here. I think we are still likely to see the system be a tropical system by this point, especially because once you get towards Bermuda, the environment does tend to get better favorability wise, and that's still true on today's model runs. Though, why is the GFS being so conservative today compared to yesterday? Well, there's a couple reasons. The first one has to do with the circulation that we have with Gabrielle today. If you look at the yellow coloring here, which is showing you the low level spin, this is showing you that we have a very broad circulation still shown on the model by this point. And the downside of a broad circulation is that it's pulling in air from a greater radii. So, for example, with all this dry air that's moving into, a broader circulation is going to be pulling more of this dry air in, which makes it much more easy for this dry air to entrain itself into the center of the storm. Now, one thing to watch for is, does this tighter area of flow pressure sustain itself for the next several days? That might be a scenario where Gabrielle has a decent fighting chance going forward with all this dry air and this wind shear. The European model is on the side of this tighter area of flow pressure holding on for the next several days. You can see these darker red colors here and more circular isobars indicating a tighter area of flow pressure that is present with the system on the model. And so this allows the system a better fighting chance, because when you have a tighter area of flow pressure like this, not only is it a less surface area being taken up, so it's not pulling in air from as many areas, but also with a tighter area of low pressure, it has a more efficient process at pulling moisture off of the ocean surface and lofting it into the air. And that, when it's lofted into the air, can help remoisten the environment and keep convection going, even in the face of all this dry air. And that may be what the European is seeing and why the European still shows a hurricane at the end of the 5-day forecast period. Now, it's important to know how subtle this is. If the area of low pressure that we're seeing today does not maintain itself, then the system may well struggle for the next several days, and we may just not see much happen out of Gabrielle. It also does not help that overall, we've seen the GFS turn more hostile wind shear wise. We talked about by the point in the Western Atlantic that there was some uncertainty yesterday in model guidance with this upper low that is now backing southwest towards the Turks and Caicos and the Northern Caribbean islands. The GFS is now turned towards the European solution of this upper low being stronger and further east. And so this keeps vertical shear over Gabrielle for longer. And that also may be why the GFS is showing the system struggling so much. And so if we do see this tighter area of low pressure that's trying to form fail, and with all the stronger shear, that may end up in a pretty weak storm overall for a Gabrielle. But on the flip side, if we do see this system maintain this tighter area of low pressure, or over the next few days, if it's able to form a tighter area of low pressure, that may give it more of a fighting chance and may allow it to intensify at some point. Because even on the GFS here, you can see that this environment does eventually get better for the system's development and intensification. We can see that by Monday next week, we now have the system directly under an area of high pressure, and it's also approaching this zone of accelerating flow aloft, a jet streak. And this has historically been shown to help systems intensify pretty quickly before. And so that may be a scenario where we still see a hurricane out of Gabrielle. But the key message today is that this is a highly uncertain forecast, and that is said in the National Hurricane Center discussion today in their forecast that they've had. For now, they're going with the model consensus that shows the system generally tracking northwest over the next few days and becoming a hurricane by late this weekend and into early next week as it moves into the vicinity of Bermuda. But again, very highly uncertain forecast, and a lot is likely to change over the next few days with this system going forward. Now, regardless of what happens, Bermuda still needs to be watching the system regardless, with this kind of an upper lower pattern that we see with this trough over the Gulf of Mexico and this jet across the Western Atlantic. No matter what kind of track this system takes, even if it's way far south, it will likely be recurving at some point. And so impact in some form or way to Bermuda are certainly possible here. And that will likely be something to watch here for Bermuda going forward as it tracks towards the northwest. For now, though, the Hurricane Center forecasts as a hurricane by Monday morning near the island, and they have noted in their discussion that interest in Bermuda need to watch the system over the next few days. But we'll keep an eye on this as it progresses for the next several days, and I'll have more videos on this and on the Western Pacific systems as we go in time. But for now, that's all that I've got to talk about with all these systems. Certainly a more active period in the tropics, which you expect this time of year. We're still in the peak month of the Northern Hemisphere cyclone season. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.